Welcome everyone. Here is my take on AMD after the company held its investor day last week. I think one of the most important charts from that session was this one. And the reason is because you can see and you can comprehend the significant increase in performance between the GPUs today and in the next 2 years. So the MI300 series and the highest performance variant, which is the MI355X, you can see in this chart where it is in terms of AI compute performance in the vertical axis. Compare that to the MI500 series, right? And you tell me whether there is no going to be, hyperscalers or customers, doubling, tripling down on sales for this GPU. Now, of course, there is a concern of funding on where is this going to come. I'm not that concerned, to be honest. I don't think Sam Altman or now Anthropic, after they closed the 50 billion, announced the 50 billion investment in the US. I don't think these guys are just announcing these figures just because. I think that they're gonna be backed somehow. They're gonna be backed by private banks, by investment funds. That money is going to come from somewhere, and we don't know yet because, of course, they don't want to disclose because there is a lot of competition, and the competition shouldn't know what are the best funding methods out there. Moving on, we have the CEO, Lisa. She doubled her estimate for the total addressable market of the AI data center space. Before, she was estimating $500 billion by 2030, and now she's seeing $1 trillion. Not bad. In fact, she also mentioned that artificial intelligence spending is not going to slow down anytime soon. So this sets up a very bullish, in my opinion, a very bullish environment for any AI data center place, be that the hyperscalers or the neo cloud like CoreWeave, Nebius, Iron, Cypher, and any other Bitcoin miners that are now pivoting towards a very lucrative business, which is fine. I like that. Why would you mine Bitcoin if you can make money, doing something else that's more, I would say, positive in terms of margins? Moving on, the latest earnings were really positive. Here you can see the consensus after the earnings, and you can see a massive increase in both EPS and revenue, especially in revenue. And you can see here the actual values. Yeah? So the 1 month trend, especially, for example, for 2030, went up by 22%. December 29, the trend went up 34%. So overall, the market is very bullish, and I believe the reason they're bullish is because of the MI500 series. It's very likely that this generation is going to compete head-to-head with Nvidia's Feynman series. So this is something to keep a very close eye on. In fact, another slide from that analyst day puts in comparison the MI550 series with the Vera Rubin. And you can see that, it's AMD that has created this slide. So, of course, they're going to say that they're better than Nvidia. But, when you look at these figures, and you look at the, memory capacity 1.5 times, the Vera Rubin, you can see the scale out bandwidth 1.5 times. And in the rest of the, the metrics like the memory bandwidth or the performance or the scale up bandwidth is the same as the Vera. So what I'm saying here is that Nvidia, even though they have, I believe, more than 80% of the market share, the product is not 4 times more, in terms of performance, it's not 4 times better than AMD's. And that is going to especially change moving into the next family series, which is the Vera, and then into the Feynman and the MI500 series. My point is that it's quite likely that Nvidia is going to lose its dominance. And that's not particularly attractive, knowing that Nvidia is $5 trillion in market cap, So if they lose market share to AMD, which I believe it is going to be the case, looking into 2027 and beyond, up until 2027 next year, there's not going to be a conversation about this. But once they deploy the MI455X, I believe there's going to be a lot of customer traction. You probably know that that's pretty much the deal with OpenAI is for the MI450 series. So that is the family of GPU to take into account. You can see here the actual variants that are going to be used both for sovereign AI and for training, AI training and inference. So these are the two variants of the 400 series that I will keep a very close eye during the earnings calls. Now, speaking of the earnings calls, China is not projected for Q4. I think it's going to be the same for Nvidia. They are not expecting sales to China, which is fine, I guess, from a margin perspective at least. However, during the Q&A, I was able to identify a very interesting conversation between a Morgan Stanley analyst and Lisa Su. So the analyst essentially asked, if you are ready, to ship those MI308s, which is, the GPU that AMD is in theory licensed to ship, but it seems that they are, pushing off the shipments because they don't have demand. Also, I think the main reason is because of the 15% deal with the US. I think AMD and Nvidia probably are not keen to give away 15% of their revenue. So I think that they just don't want to ship to China simply because they don't like the industrial policy of the US. So I think that there is not a problem of demand, it's more a problem of the CEO being a bit reluctant to give away revenue to the US just because. So that's my theory. Now, what she said is that they received the licenses, all right, for the MI308. That was back in August, I believe. So they are very appreciative of the administration supporting some licenses. Good. They are still working with customers on the demand environment and sort of what the overall opportunity is. Also, we will be able to update that more in the next couple of months. Okay, this is important. So if she said that, maybe, and this is a big maybe, she's in conversations with Chinese customers and maybe she's already seeing the first hints of a potential deal between AMD and a Chinese customer, likely Alibaba, for example. Definitely not Huawei, although who knows what's going to happen with the GPUs once they land in China. So the thing is that, Q1 next year, I wouldn't discard completely sales of this family of GPU to China. But the environment is difficult there because they have a regulator that, is disincentivizing the local companies to buy the MI308s. So I'm not that bullish on sales to China. Also, there was a risk. So the analyst asked, are you going to have to start to kind of rebuild inventory for that, if they resume the MI308s? She said something, she essentially said yes. So she didn't say yes, but she said yes. So that's how I interpret it. We have had some work in process. I think we continue to have that work in process, but we'll have to see sort of how the demand environment shapes up. She didn't reply to the question. She just said that there is some work in process. I believe in progress. Maybe this is from the transcript. Now, some work in progress, I think she doesn't have visibility because she's not, or the company is not that serious in selling to China. That's my opinion. So likely, this region is going to be difficult moving into next year between the regulators, between Trump's 15% tariff, and the two companies not really keen on giving away revenues. Now, when you look at the street's expectations for revenue, they're quite positive. When I say quite positive, it's crazy positive. Take a look at the EPS. All right, sorry, let's go to revenue first. As you can see in the chart here, revenue is going to accelerate. So you have, Q1, it's a small 1% decline. This is sequential decline, so 24% year over year more sales, but 1% down sequentially. But then in the second quarter, it's going to go up 29%. Okay, then again 25, and then 38, 42, 43. You see where I'm going. So the street is anticipating an acceleration in sales, and that is likely going to happen by the end of 2026. I believe that is going to be when the MI400 series is going to be available in mass production. So this jump in growth, I think, is because of the availability of the MI400 series. Now, when you look at EPS, earnings per share, the growth is even more spectacular, especially in the second quarter next year. And then you can see that aggressive growth, moving into end of 2026 and the start and continuation of 2027. Again, I think the MI455X may be a very direct competitor for the Vera Rubin, and it's quite likely that they're going to win. So something to take into account. You can see here the different GPUs, and as I said, the one that is really interesting is the MI500 series because of the massive increase in AI compute performance. In the near term, MI450 series is the one to keep an eye on. So far, the CEO just said 2026. I think she doesn't want to commit to a specific date. And this is telling me that maybe, the analysts, they already assume that volume production is going to kick in Q4 because you already see the estimates, right? So you can see right here, revenue jumping from 25 to 38. So it's very likely Q4 is going to be the ramp. Now, why wouldn't she commit Q4 if everyone in the street knows Q4 is going to be the ramp? I think it's because she's still positive on likely, releasing the MI400 series before Q4, so maybe Q3. And I think that's the reason why, she's not committing for a specific date for this family. It's just 2026, but there is no actual date for that. Now, when you look at total revenues and the performance for, the past few years, it's absolutely spectacular. You can see the significant increase in revenue, and of course, that's driven by the data center segment. Significant increase in 2024. And of course, this comes down because if you have close to no revenue or very, very little revenue in the data center segment, and then you start ramping up, of course, that's going to blow up, the figures, the growth, and then it's going to look like it's slowing down because, especially in this case, AMD, the reason why they had a very good quarter is because of the MI355X, which has been in volume production, and that is the focus right now. I think that a lot of customers were, delaying purchases to wait for, a better performing GPU. Now, looking at the fundamentals, one thing I like and another thing that I don't. So this is the one in yellow. That's the data center segment. From a top line perspective, revenue went up by about 23% in the data center segment. And when you look at EBIT, so this is operating income, it's kind of flat, so 1.04 billion in Q3 24, and then it's 1.07 billion in Q3 25. It's flat pretty much. So even though the top line grew by 22%, the bottom line didn't. Good, perfect. So that's my analysis so far. So overall, the picture is all about the MI450 series next year. Until then, if you look at the charts, well, I would say that AMD is at the mercy of the tech sector. The last 2 days were quite rough, especially, they had a massive run of 9%, on Wednesday 12th. However, 4% down, and today before the market opened, it was down by another 4%, but it recovered eventually. So this looks like a clear breakout. All right, the narrative and the story is positive because you can see the growth. I mean, when you look at the top line growth over the next few quarters, that looks fine. But in between quarters, I would say that there is little edge that you could use because the closest big catalyst is the MI400 series next year, and you don't know when it is, and you will only know when it is likely during an earnings call. So bullish, all right. I wouldn't know to put a price target on this because it's quite difficult. But unless the AI narrative weakens before the next earnings release, I would expect shares to consolidate around this level. And likely next quarter, if results come, positive, then it would likely accelerate. But it's very difficult right now to put a prediction on the movement because we already broke, from a resistance, tested out, and for this to go up, you need, either high beta, so you need either a broader bull run in the tech sector, or you need something special. I don't think it's gonna run just because. All right, so that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.